So I'm going to talk about some improvisation things about making good solos. And there's a lot of different techniques that can be used. Now it's really dark. And ultimately, a good soloist is going to use a combination of any and all the things that they know to do this. So the first thing, and I did a little bit in the introduction there, chord tones. So the main feature of this is it goes from D major to D minor. So you're going then it goes to minor. And using the chord tones is a really good way to start. I'm backing off the reverb a little bit here. Because the chord tones are always going to sound good. And also, when there's movement from one chord to the next, if you're using the chord tones, that's going to outline the harmonic motion that's happening. So that's pretty simple. So if you just play just the chord tones all the time, okay, that's not necessarily going to be super exciting. So what would the next thing be? I would say the next thing I would focus on would be the motifs. So for the phrasing, the unifying piece is often repetition of the idea that you come up with. And this is something that over time people will just naturally develop this, where your playing becomes conversational. And so I will explore that. That was a variation. So I repeated some motives there. Probably not the best ones, but that's what I came up with. And definitely using rhythm is really an important and kind of underrepresented thing, because there's so many people that can shred and play a lot of notes, but the rhythmic aspect of improvisation is so important. I mean, every person that's like a great soloist pretty much has a good time feel. So like building a solo is important too, and one way to do that is to start simple and increase complexity, and there's different ways you could do that, so I will demonstrate that. sorry about all the key noise there. And also in that clip, I was using motives too, and that it's just something that I've developed from playing for so long. I don't even think about these things that much when I'm playing. I'm just trying to tell a story. But those are sort of the ingredients that go into it. Some of the ingredients. So let's see. We talked about playing chord tones. I talked about motives. I talked about building the intensity and going from simple to complex. Let's see what else there is. Rhythmic variation is an important thing. I'm going to change this to a different track because that's going to get old after a while. So let's go to oh, this will be fun. Okay. So rhythmic variation, let's see. And the classic thing is the one note solo. Like think Men at Work, Who Can It Be Now, right? So that kind of thing. And so I was doing some syncopation there. I did some subdivision by eighth notes, and I went to triplets, 16ths, which is probably kind of sloppy. Those type of I don't know, not evolution, but going through different types of subdivision. That's definitely a useful tool. There's a really good synth solo of a tune. I can't think of the name of the tune, which one it is. It's Justin Stanton from Snarky Puppy, and what he does at the end of the solo, or maybe it's the whole solo, I think actually, is he kind of starts simple, and he's doing, I don't know if it's whole notes or not whole notes. I think he maybe starts with quarter notes or eighth notes, and then it gets it progresses, and it gets like more and more notes per beat, going from like eighth notes to triplets to 16ths to whatever. And by doing that, it really builds the intensity. So that that's one kind of thing. But syncopation is really important, and depending on the style of music, you hear a lot of syncopation. Obviously in a funk type thing, that's really important because it's all about the rhythm. So there's that. Neighboring tones is another thing you can get into. So you have your chord tones, which in this case, this is pretty simple. So we're just on a F7, right? Chord tones would be but the neighboring tones are important. The classic kind of jazz neighboring tone thing would be So using the upper neighbor down to the chord tone, which is like the 4 to 3, the 9 to the 8. And those are really useful. It could be chromatic neighboring tones too. What else is there I could do? Let's see, with this. And then you can get into side slipping. This is more of an advanced thing where you're playing notes that are not in the chord, but then you resolve it. If I can do this good. I'll do one cycling through fourths. That's a classic one over a funk thing. So you go. So you're playing notes that are outside, but then you try to resolve them inside. I don't think I did a great job there. Let's see. That almost worked, but I didn't quite resolve it the right one. Let's try it again. Another thing you hear with the kind of outside and cyclical lines like that is where somebody uses a motive, so you kind of have a unifying feature as you're taking it out, so that it keeps the listener engaged because it doesn't sound as far out. So when you use repetition, when you do that, you know, which I was doing with like the fourth line, you know, you know, there's all these different intervallic things that you can play, but when you're using repeating motive that way, it kind of ties it together so it doesn't sound like just complete random outside stuff. So if you're playing an F and you got your whereas if you approach that differently, where it's hard for me to even do it because my brain is kind of hardwired to like use sequencing. And you know, I was talking about motives before, but melodic sequencing is what you would call that, where you're taking something and you're changing the notes, but you're keeping the phrasing. It's real useful, and it's a good thing to practice. So if you're practicing in F like that, that's not a good example really in key there, but it let me try this again. So I kind of ended up being a whole tone scale during part of that, but that's just because I was using whole steps. Which sounds kind of outside, but I mean, you can really make that work. And I come back to the chord tones a lot. I mean, that's probably my favorite thing to do is trying to use the chord tones, because the chord tones, always work. Now, there was obviously a passing tone in there. So the 6th, then the 7th. Then there's the 3rd. Another interesting trick to use is common intervals. So there's like a tritone in there with the 3rd and the 7th, right? You get you're an F. So you could move tritones around in your lines. Yeah, that's getting a little trickier. I mean, there's all these different things you can do with interval cycles where you work on fourths and fifths. I use them a lot in my improvised pieces. So, I might do something that's based on fourths. Could make it fifth based. And that's also a unifying thing because you're moving, you're moving kind of a phrase through different modes, sort of. Sixth. And then sequencing phrases is really good, so. In terms of things to practice, I mean, you don't want to use that in a solo necessarily, but, it helps having different things under your fingers when you have the technical facility because you've practice things through different keys. That's really useful, especially when you're playing with other people and they go, oh, we're going to count out this tune, it's in B or whatever, and then it's like, if you're used to just playing in like C and D all the time, it'll seem weird. But I play in too much the same keys a lot in my improvisations, I've noticed. But I do, work on things in different keys a lot. I actually shared a clip the other day where I was, going through different. It was like that bossa nova kind of thing, and I could do it with this. This is easy. So the Session Band app is what I'm using. It's really convenient because you can change keys. Up a whole step. Go up 2 more half steps to A. Chromatics. So that kind of thing. I mean, this could be like an hour-long video if I keep talking, but those are some real basic improvisational techniques that, kind of essential things that will help somebody kind of get on their way in terms of how to create and develop an interesting solo. And players use any and all of these different concepts all at the same time. Probably the most important one, and the reason I started with that, is the chord tones. Because the chord tones, throughout everything that I did, I was probably using chord tones the most. And then after that, it was probably like melodic sequence and repetition. It gets to like it's sort of subconscious at some point. You've been playing long enough, you don't necessarily think about these things, but definitely chord tones are just so important, especially when you're going through actual sequences of chord progressions. So it's easy to take a one chord song or a two chord vamp and solo over, but what happens when you have, three or four chords, or you're over the form of an actual song? I'll wrap up with this. So this is a vamp that goes through four chords, and I use the chord tones to kind of keep myself honest on this, to make sure I'm playing it. So it goes from D to B flat to F to C. And actually, I use common tones a lot in this, and that was the one I should have talked about before. So you're going through this chord progression, and one thing that's really helpful, it's kind of loud. One thing that's really helpful for the soloing is finding the common tones, because otherwise you're jumping, especially if there's a lot of chords in a progression, and using the common tones is really helpful. So let's see if I can do that. So F sharp is the third, it's also the ninth. The one is the third, then it's the sixth of that one. So actually a lot of the notes in the D major will fit over the other chords, but not all of them. In most of these, it's like there's one note that changes. So let's see. And I'm using voice leading there. So you're going from the, typically you go from the seventh to the third, but it could be different depending on the relationship. Oops. So in that I was using a combination of the chord tones and also the common tones from one chord to the next. And then I was doing voice leading, where you're sort of going towards a target note of the next chord. And actually I'm going to do this without the track and you can hear it better. So if you're coming into the D chord from the chord before, which is a C, You probably want to hit either the major seventh, which is a really strong note, or the major third, instead of just landing on the root. So you're in C. And you're going to end up in D. So you're in C. So I used the major seventh to get to the next chord. You could do the third. There I used the third, or you could come down by steps. That's a real common voice leading phrase that people use. Then we'll go into the B flat chord. You're on the third, which is also the root of the one before. Then to the F. That wasn't very good. So in that sequence, I was doing a little voice leading. Then I actually went back and did some of the arpeggios, starting from the ninth, going down, descending with the major seventh. So I was like in D, I did, and then in B flat. And if you play through the chords that way, you really start to hear the chord tones as you're working through it, and then it'll become more comfortable when you're trying to do the voice leading, where you're doing the So that kind of thing. That's enough talking. Hopefully this will be helpful.